Hello and welcome back. Stay with me until the very last word today, because what I am about to share with you is going to completely change the way you understand avoidant men, older women, and what human beings are truly searching for when they say they want love. There is a man out there right now who is emotionally unavailable, who pulls away the moment things start getting real, who is terrified of being truly known by another person, and yet he is completely drawn to a woman who is 15 years older than him. The people around him cannot figure it out. His friends think it is just a phase. His family thinks it is unusual. But what if I told you it is actually one of the most logical things he has ever done in his entire life? And once you genuinely understand why, you will never look at avoidant men the same way again. Because here is what nobody is actually telling you. The reason avoidant men feel drawn to older women has almost nothing to do with physical attraction alone. And it has almost nothing to do with the so-called maturity thing that everyone casually mentions. It goes so much deeper than that. It is rooted in psychology, in childhood wounds, in the way the avoidant nervous system is literally wired to seek safety while simultaneously running from intimacy. And when you truly understand the real mechanism behind this, something clicks. Not just about avoidant men, but about relationships, about attachment, about what human beings are actually searching for when they say they want love. So let us get into this properly. To understand why avoidant men feel drawn to older women, you first have to understand what an avoidant is actually running from. Because when most people hear the word avoidant, they think it simply means someone who does not want commitment, someone who is emotionally cold, someone who pushes people away. And while those things can be true on the surface, they completely miss the actual engine driving the behavior underneath. An avoidant is not running from love. They are running from a very specific kind of pain. The pain of needing someone and then being let down by them. That is the core wound. At some point in their life, usually in childhood, they learned that needing people leads to disappointment. They learned that expressing vulnerability, expressing need, opening up emotionally leads to rejection, or to being smothered, or to being abandoned, or to some response that felt deeply unsafe. And so their nervous system made a sophisticated and painful adaptation. It decided to stop needing people, or more accurately, it decided to pretend it did not need people while still desperately craving connection underneath. This is crucial. The avoidant is not someone without emotional needs. That is one of the biggest misconceptions about this attachment style. The avoidant has enormous emotional needs. They just have an equally enormous fear of expressing those needs, because somewhere in their past, expressing those needs got them hurt. So they built walls. They learned to be self-sufficient. They learned to be the one who does not need anything from anyone. They wear independence like armor. And for a while it works. It protects them. It keeps the pain at a distance. But it also keeps genuine connection away, which creates a loneliness that runs so deep it becomes almost unbearable. Now here is where older women enter the picture. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting. When an avoidant man encounters an older woman, something happens in his nervous system that does not happen with women his own age or younger. And to understand what that thing is, you need to understand the concept of perceived emotional threat. Every time an avoidant person enters a relationship, there is a part of their nervous system that is constantly scanning for threat. Not physical threat, but emotional threat. The threat of being consumed. The threat of being needed too much by the other person. The threat of feeling trapped. The threat of someone wanting more from them than they feel safe giving. This internal threat detection system is running in the background all the time, even when things seem fine on the surface, even when the avoidant genuinely likes the person they are with, even when part of them wants the relationship to work. And this is exactly why avoidants so often seem to pull away right when things get good. It is not that the intimacy is bad for them. It is that the intimacy triggers the alarm system. The closer someone gets, the louder the alarm. And the alarm says the same thing it has always said. Get out. Protect yourself. You are about to get hurt. Now, with many women who are around the same age or younger, that alarm tends to trigger quite quickly. Not because those women are doing anything wrong, but because of a combination of factors that feed directly into the avoidance threat perception. Let me walk you through those factors one by one, because this is where the real insight lives. The first factor is timeline pressure. When an avoidant man is in a relationship with a woman in her late 20s or early 30s, there is often an invisible but extremely powerful social pressure hovering in the background. The pressure of where is this going? The pressure of biological clocks. The pressure of meeting families, of talking about the future, of moving in together, of all the socially prescribed relationship milestones that come with that particular life stage. And to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a woman wanting those things. Those are completely legitimate and reasonable desires. But for an avoidant, that background pressure is felt constantly and acutely, even when nobody is explicitly saying anything about it. He can feel it in small comments. He can feel it in the way holidays are discussed. He can feel it in the pace at which things seem to be expected to progress. And every time he feels that pressure, his alarm goes off. His walls come up. He starts quietly looking for the exit. With an older woman, specifically women who are in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, women who have lived full and layered lives, who have often already navigated the timeline pressure themselves, the dynamic shifts significantly. The alarm does not trigger in the same way because the perceived pressure feels genuinely different. She is often not operating from the same place of urgency. She has already built a life, a career, an identity that does not depend on this particular relationship to validate her worth. And the avoidant can feel that difference. It does not feel like a trap. It feels like space to actually breathe. The second factor is emotional self-sufficiency. This is one of the most underrated reasons avoidants are drawn to older women, and it takes a little nuance to fully appreciate. When a person has lived enough life, when they have been through enough experiences, when they have built a genuine relationship with themselves through years of growth and heartbreak and self-discovery, they tend to carry a kind of emotional self-sufficiency that younger people are still in the process of developing. This is not a criticism of younger women at all. It is simply a reality that emotional self-sufficiency, real self-sufficiency, the kind that is not a performance, the kind that does not collapse under pressure, takes time and lived experience to genuinely build. An emotionally self-sufficient woman does not need the avoidant to be her entire emotional world. She has her own friendships, her own passions, her own interior life, her own sense of self that exists completely independently of the relationship. And for the avoidant man, this is not just attractive, it is profoundly disarming. Because the number one fear of an avoidant in a relationship is becoming someone's everything. It is the fear of being the sole source of someone's happiness, of someone's emotional stability, of someone's sense of self-worth. Because if he is someone's everything, then he has to show up perfectly all the time, or he will devastate them. And that level of emotional responsibility absolutely terrifies him. It makes him want to run. But when he is with a woman who has her own full life, who does not need him to complete her, who is genuinely okay when he needs space, who has other real sources of joy and connection in her life, that terror quiets down. He can actually breathe. He can be present in the relationship in a way he struggles to be in relationships where the emotional stakes feel suffocating. And this is one of the painful ironies of the avoidant dynamic. The partners who love them most intensely, who want them most desperately, who are most emotionally invested in the relationship, those are often the partners who trigger the most avoidance. Because from the avoidance perspective, that intensity feels like pressure. That investment feels like a trap. The more someone visibly needs them, the more urgently they need to escape. Whereas the partner who seems to need them least, who has her own full world, who does not spiral when he pulls back, that partner somehow makes him feel safe enough to actually stay and show up. The third factor is what I would call the judgment differential. Avoidants are deeply and profoundly afraid of being judged. Not just judged for their actions, but judged for their emotional reality, judged for needing space, judged for being difficult, judged for not being able to give what their partner wants. There is almost always a layer of shame running beneath the avoidant pattern, a quiet sense of, I am broken, I am too much, I am not enough, I am fundamentally difficult to love. And when they perceive judgment from a partner, even just a look, even a tone of voice, even a question asked in the wrong moment, it confirms that shame and sends them straight back into their shell. Older women, generally speaking, have had enough relationship experience to understand that people are genuinely complicated. They have usually been in relationships that did not work out. They have done some version of their own self-reflection. They have made their own mistakes. They carry their own complicated history. And that lived experience tends to produce a kind of earned non-judgment, a quality of acceptance and perspective that the avoidant finds incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. When an avoidant man is with a woman who does not react to his complexity with panic or ultimatums, who can hold space for the fact that he is a complicated human being without immediately trying to fix him or shame him or threaten to leave, he feels something he almost never feels in relationships. He feels safe. And when an avoidant feels genuinely safe, something remarkable begins to happen. He leans in. Not immediately, not perfectly, but he leans in. The fourth factor is what happens to power dynamics in these relationships. In the avoidant's internal world, vulnerability equals danger. Being exposed, being truly known, being seen in your mess and your fear and your need, that is experienced as deeply threatening. And in most relationships, there is a real underlying fear that vulnerability will eventually be weaponized, that the moment he opens up, that openness will be used against him, that his needs will be mocked or ignored or held over him. This fear is almost always rooted in past experience, not necessarily romantic experience, but early experience with caregivers who did not handle his emotional world with care. Now, in a relationship where the woman is significantly younger or even the same age, the avoidant can sometimes feel a subtle but real pressure to perform, to be the strong one, to maintain a certain image of being put together. And that performance, that need to appear invulnerable, actually reinforces his avoidant patterns. It gives him nowhere safe to be messy. And without a space to be messy, he cannot access anything real. With an older woman, something genuinely shifts in that dynamic. She has usually seen enough of life to not be shaken by a man who has fears, or who admits he does not have everything figured out. She is not looking for a fantasy version of a man. She is looking for a real one. And paradoxically, that makes the avoidant feel something he does not often feel at all, which is permission to be human, permission to be imperfect, permission to stop performing for someone else. And when that permission exists, when someone creates that kind of genuinely accepting space, the avoidance defenses have less reason to stay fully up. The fifth factor, and I think this may be the deepest one of all, is the connection to early emotional wounds. Many avoidant men, not all, but many, developed their attachment style in response to a specific kind of early dynamic with their primary caregiver. The specific wound varies from person to person. Some avoidants grew up with caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, physically present, but emotionally distant. Others grew up in environments where emotional unpredictability made the child feel responsible for the adults around them, which is its own form of deep wound. Others experienced love that felt conditional or inconsistent. What most avoidants share, though, is some form of early experience where the most important relationship in their life did not feel emotionally safe. And what they carry into adulthood, often completely below the level of conscious awareness, is a template for what intimate relationships feel like, what they expect, what they fear, what they are quietly waiting to go wrong. Now, when an avoidant man encounters an older woman who is warm, who is secure, who is genuinely caring without being controlling, who can be nurturing without being smothering, something in his nervous system recognizes that quality on a very deep level. not on a conscious level, but on a much older, deeper one. His nervous system says, "This feels different. This feels safe. This feels like what I always needed and never fully received." And the pull toward that feeling can be extraordinarily powerful, even when he cannot put words to why he feels it so strongly. Now, here is where I need to introduce an important and honest complication to everything shared so far. Because the draw is only half the story, and the second half is where things get complicated and where people in these relationships need to pay very close attention. When an avoidant finally feels safe, when they finally encounter a dynamic that quiets the alarm system, they do not automatically transform into a fully secure, emotionally available partner overnight. The wounds that created the avoidant pattern did not disappear simply because they found someone who does not trigger them as sharply. The wounds are still there. The nervous system is still fundamentally wired in the same way. And what tends to happen in these relationships, if they are not navigated carefully, is a very specific and very painful cycle. The avoidant gets close. He opens up more than he ever has before. He feels something genuine and real. And then at some point, the intimacy crosses a threshold, and the old alarm sounds again. Not as loudly as it used to, but loud enough. And he pulls back. Not because he does not care. Not because the relationship is not working, but because his nervous system has reached its current capacity for emotional closeness and is doing the only thing it knows how to do in that moment, which is to create distance. And this is where the older woman faces her own real test. Because the pullback feels personal, even for someone who has lived enough life to understand intellectually that it is not. Even for someone who has done her own inner work, who has her own full life, who is not defining herself by the relationship, the pullback still stings. It still raises the honest question of whether this is worth continuing. What she does in that moment matters enormously. If she responds with panic, with pursuit, with ultimatums, she inadvertently becomes exactly what the avoidant was afraid of all along. She confirms the fear and pushes him further away. But if she responds with a kind of grounded, centered equanimity, if she gives him the space he needs without withdrawing her warmth entirely, without punishing him for his fear, without losing herself completely in the process, something genuinely different can happen. He comes back. Not always, and not every avoidant heals within a relationship, but when healing in relationship is possible, it is usually because the other person managed to hold the delicate balance between giving space and disappearing, between having real standards and being rigid, between caring deeply and losing themselves entirely. That is an extraordinarily difficult balance to hold, but when it is held consistently, something remarkable becomes genuinely possible over time. Now let us also talk about what the older woman receives from this dynamic, because this dimension gets almost completely ignored in conversations about this topic, and it genuinely matters. There is something that a younger avoidant man offers an older woman that is truly rare. When an avoidant man has actually let someone in, when he has genuinely dropped his walls with another person, he is experiencing something he almost never allows himself to experience. He is fully emotionally present. And when he is present, when he is truly in it, the quality of his attention is extraordinary. Because this is not someone who opens up to everyone casually. When an avoidant man chooses you, when he actually lets you in past the wall, it feels like being the one person in 100 who found the door to a room nobody else ever sees. And that feeling of being chosen by someone who does not choose easily is deeply powerful and deeply real. For an older woman who may have been in relationships where she felt taken for granted, where intimacy had become routine, where a partner stopped truly seeing her, the quality of genuine attention from a man who is authentically captivated by who she is can feel like being brought back to life in a way that is difficult to fully put into words. But here is what matters most as we bring this all together. The avoidant drawn to the older woman is ultimately expressing what every avoidant is truly searching for, whether they realize it or not. They are searching for safety. For someone grounded enough to hold closeness without making it feel suffocating. For love without the fear that has always accompanied intimacy before. The attraction is not simply about age. It is about the way many older women naturally show up in relationships. Years of experience often create a calm, secure, self-possessed presence. And that kind of steady, genuine warmth can quiet the avoidance alarm system in a way they may have never experienced before. But here's what matters most. That quality is not exclusive to older women. It does not come automatically with age alone. Some people remain deeply emotionally insecure, regardless of how many years pass. And some younger people have done the honest inner work to become remarkably grounded far earlier in life. Age itself is not the real variable here. Emotional maturity is. And emotional maturity is something that can be cultivated deliberately at any stage of life by anyone willing to do the real work. Which means if you genuinely want to build something real and lasting with someone who is avoidant, the goal is not to act detached or perform emotional games. The goal is to become genuinely grounded within yourself. To build a life where a relationship adds to your happiness instead of defining it entirely. To give space because you actually feel secure in who you are, not because you are hoping distance will make someone chase you. Avoidants can almost always sense the difference between those two things. They have spent their entire lives detecting when love comes wrapped in hidden expectations. If you want them to feel safe enough to open up, you have to become a genuinely safe person yourself. Not perfect, just emotionally honest, self-aware, and committed to your own continued growth. Because the healthiest dynamic for an avoidant is never one built on self-sacrifice. Real growth becomes possible when both people are taking genuine responsibility for themselves, showing up with clear boundaries, real self-respect, and lives that do not revolve entirely around each other. At the end of the day, the avoidant is not truly obsessed with an older woman as a category. He is obsessed with a feeling. The feeling that closeness no longer means danger, that he can be imperfect, fully seen, and still loved. And really, is that not what all of us want? Our attachment styles may differ, our fears may look different, but underneath them all is the same desire: to be known, accepted, and loved without constantly feeling unsafe. That is why understanding attachment matters. Not just to explain someone else's behavior, but to better understand your own. Because once you see these dynamics clearly, you stop reacting from old wounds and start responding from a place of real clarity. And that shift changes everything. So whether you are trying to understand an avoidant partner, your own attachment patterns, or why this dynamic exists, I hope this gave you something genuinely real to take with you today. Keep doing the work. Keep asking honest questions, because the questions you ask shape the quality of the love you experience and create. And you deserve a love that is not just intense or exciting, but deeply secure, genuinely healthy, truly lasting. Thank you so much for being here today, and I will see you in the next one.